Hey, my friends. So, this is kind of a follow-up to a comment I made just sort of offhandedly the other day in a walkthrough of, I think it was the Natural Ink Tarot, where I talked a little bit about how, as a reader, I struggle finding, tarot decks that picture modern scenes and modern life easy to work with, or even sort of lacking sort of a tarot-y feeling. So I mentioned in that video that it was a bias that I have to sort of work with, and that a lot of the tarot decks that we use, including the Waite Smith, depict this sort of never time that didn't really exist. It's sort of it's like the way that people do Shakespeare. It's sort of a non-Shakespeare past, and for a lot of folks that represents a period in world history of colonialism and genocide, right? Like, so, it's like a weird thing, but I know a lot of tarot readers kind of feel similar. It's like there's something kind of either timeless or historical that feels very like tarot, and things that are modern sort of feel somehow less that. And so I wanted to sort of actively challenge that for myself, you know what I mean? Because I have a lot of decks that are relatively new and relatively modern, and so what I thought I would do is bring them down from my shelf and show them to you, just because it's a good excuse to make a video. It's a good excuse for me to look at what I have, but also just to sort of talk a little bit about why they're successful and maybe things that I have to overcome as a reader in dealing with them, And this isn't to say that your preference for whatever kind of decks you like is bad or wrong or whatever. I'm just saying that, it makes sense to me why folks would find historical tarot decks quote-unquote problematic. And it also makes sense to me why readers have a hard time feeling the tarot-ness of modern scenes. So this is a thing that I am sort of bringing these down so that I can sort of challenge myself to work with them and really find I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, to find, to challenge or transcend my bias against tarot decks showing modern life. One reason I give a lot of the time is that they can sometimes get really dated really quickly because our technology and our world changes so quickly. So I'm going to stop rambling and just sort of share some with you. These may not be all of the ones I have. I have a lot to show you, so this is going to be a relatively long video. So I will try to get to it. I'm not going to show all of every deck. I have walkthroughs of many of these. If I don't, then there's others that are out there. This is the Wheel of Change Tarot, which is not new. This is a deck that was out, I don't even know. If I pulled the book off the shelf, it would tell me, but I forgot to do that. Maybe early 2000s, maybe late 90s, I can't quite remember. It's a mix of things. It's a mix of the world. This is a deck I actually really like. It's one that I just forget about a lot. This is out of print. I think that this was either a Weisser or a Llewellyn deck. I can't remember now. But I think that the creator did do an indie version of it, and it has a different back. But if you Google the Wheel of Change Tarot, you can find it. So this kind of has a modern feeling of looking back at different parts of the world. And I think this is one of those decks that was really early on, sort of pre-discussion of representation in our world. And I don't think it exploded, like a lot of decks that I've taught, like the World Spirit is another example of it, of a deck where it sort of maybe was ahead of its time, or maybe just didn't hit, what people were, I don't know, maybe it was just the old devil white supremacy sort of getting in the way as usual. But I really, really like this deck a lot. Because it's out of print, I tend to shove it up on the shelf, and then I'll pull it down for some reason and think, oh, I really like this. This might even have come out around the time I started reading or before. So this could be, 25 years old. I really should look. But anyway, it really is a good one in a lot of ways, and there's a really big, thick book that comes with it that explains a lot. And I think, it's not necessarily modern, but it sort of spans the globe. The question for me in looking at it is going to the book to see how authentic things really are. But I guess I did go through this whole thing. Anyway, that's the Wheel of Change Tarot. So it sort of sits in this sort of never space of time, but it is a relatively modern look at tarot, and certainly one that explores the globe a bit more and sort of shows modern life. This next one isn't new either. It's new-ish. This is the... Oh god, I'm gonna have to go look at what this is. I can't even remember the name of it. Hold, please. Alright, this is the Gaian Tarot. That is the name of it. I had to go look at the shelves. There comes a point where too much is too much. And I have too much. And I was trying to find the book for the Wheel of Change Tarot, and just my shelves, I started just finding them collapsing on myself. So this is a deck that a lot of people really love. Now, this is the Llewellyn edition, which a very kind viewer offered me in a trade, and I accepted it because the Schiffer edition, the Red Feather edition, sucks. It's huge, the cardstock is terrible, it's gilded, it's very plasticky, it feels very much like the antithesis of what this deck should be. This is an example of one that, while the artistic style I really like, I've had a hard time connecting to it as a deck for reading, because it is so contemporary. And it's like, as I'm looking at it, I can feel my resistance to a lot of the cards. And just like, oh no, it's too contemporary. It looks too much like modern life. And some of these cards, like this is one of the most beautiful strength cards ever, It's a beautiful deck. And Joanna Powell Colbert's artwork is fantastic. It's just like the contemporariness of it really is a thing that I resist as a reader, and I really want to get over that. Anyway, so it's a really beautiful deck. This version is not easy to find. I was really lucky to have it offered to me in a trade from someone who's like, I think, given the way that you work with decks and you talk about tarot, this is a deck that should be in your collection, and I'm really glad that I have this one. And it's a really good one. I have worked with this, so it is absolutely a deck that it's not sat on my shelf, despite being out of print. But it is, a deck that I resist. I can feel myself as a reader resisting. And the reason that that's problematic for me is that I get distracted by it. This is the Trueheart Intuitive Tarot, which I have used extensively because when I did my Intro to Tarot course for sort of new readers, I asked everyone in the group to get this deck because I felt like it was in the Waite-Smith tradition, but decidedly modern, representational. Aside from everyone sort of being young and thin and abled, it was, about as sort of timeless, quote-unquote, is a word that I keep using to sort of mean that it didn't feel too contemporary without sort of living in this sort of Euro never space. And we worked with it a lot, and we had fun with it. I think people really liked it. The problems with this particular deck really aren't the artwork. I like the artwork quite a lot, actually. It's a little sort of like magazine-y, but it's really good. I think the thing that people don't like, and the students in my workshop, or really I should say the participants in my workshop, didn't like, is the cardstock, and it's an expensive deck for what it is, and the box that it comes in is terrible, and the artist who did the artwork is really sort of hidden. You really have to look for it because it's under the name of the person who wrote the book, Rachel True. So that's the thing I don't love, even though, it is a situation where this was probably work for hire. In publishing, when it's work for hire, the artist usually doesn't get credit or doesn't get credited as actively as the author. Sort of like they become the illustrator for a book. But to me, the artist did the work. And when we're using a tarot, we may or may not remember what the guidebook said, but we're looking at the images. The next one is a really good one that I had a really positive review of. This is the Queer Tarot by Ash and... Is it on here? Ash and Chess. This one comes in a really nice box, really nice book. This is a cardstock issue for me, but I really like this one. The cardstock is that kind of, it's thick, it's matte, it's just sticky. And it's thick for my hands, it's really hard to shuffle. See, I'm not doing that on purpose. I'm just sort of struggling like someone with small hands in a thick deck. It is shuffleable. And when I can get my hands around it, it's a good one. I really love this like vibrant neon color scheme, and it's just a very queer experience, and very, very summer in a lot of ways. Totally Waite Smith in tradition, but just very sort of fabulous in terms of queerness and representation of queer people and people of different ethnicities and skin tones, etc. Here's someone who has a port. So it's like, it's sort of, again, one of those decks that kind of is what we keep asking for, and I think this really delivers. I love this deck a lot. I do wish the cardstock were a little easier for me to get my hands around. But as far as a Waite Smith goes and bringing it into this millennium and into this life, I think this is about as successful as a pure sort of Waite Smith clone can get, and this sort of like punk rock back I love. So this to me is a deck that I actually always have, I have had out on my table, although the number of decks on my table right now has grown exponentially, mostly because I pull something out to look at or use and it stays out, but I never put others away, and like I'm sort of overwhelmed with stuff at the moment. Love that one. This next one is interesting. This is the Wandering Star Tarot, and this is another one that I can't quite tell whether it's modern. I can't quite tell whether I respond to it. This is the Kickstarter edition. I know that this has come out as a mass market because I've actually seen it in mass market bookstores. I backed it, it came in, and I think I may have done a walkthrough of it, and then it went right on the shelf. I've literally never used it. I think I may have shuffled it, because when I pulled it off the shelf just now, this edition was really nice. I mean, it had a full color guidebook. Really, I love black borders. I love black edges, black boxes. I just think they look gorgeous. And this is like, it's like a almost satiny blue. This is modern in its sort of interpretation. It's very woman-centric. It's very kind of youth-centric, I would say. There's a youthfulness to this deck, which certainly doesn't bother me at all. It is fairly representational. I would say most people are fairly thin. It does kind of sit in like a never time again, a little bit sort of like the first deck I showed you, the Wheel of Change. It doesn't have a super specific current time period, which actually I think things that are modern without sort of having cell phones is interesting to me, because again, like when I look at a deck from like 1998 or 2002, that was modern then, it's sort of like, oh yeah, I can see that this looks like it was 20 years ago. I don't know how I feel about this one, honestly. I really don't. So, I mean, I think it's a successful artwork. I backed it for a reason, but it's never one, again, that has necessarily called to me. There are keywords on a lot of the minors, but they're woven into the artwork in such a way that I really actually like it, and I don't really see them unless I'm looking for them. So in a lot of ways, I think this is a really cool deck. In other ways, I think it sort of relies on stereotype. And then in other ways, I can't quite wrap my mind around it. It's definitely one that I don't know how I feel about beyond sort of, I don't know. It's interesting. Again, this is my thing with sort of modern-ish decks. And maybe even one reason why I get so attracted to pit decks is that my resistance is strong in some cases. I'm going to have to start putting these behind me. This is a deck I've had for a while. Again, it's not immediately new, but it's modern. It's the Cesar Ribito deck, which is incredibly popular. And it's funny, I just see Lost here. This deck I could not find for a long time, and it was right in front of my face. It was one of those situations. I love this deck. The thing that I have had with this deck is that in some spreads it's gorgeous, and then in some spreads the color palette turns me, because it's very yellow, and for some reason I don't like the color yellow. But there's a reason why this deck is popular, and some of the cards are so beautiful. The Six of Swords, for example, this Hermit, even the Three of Swords. The Devil in this deck is one that I really love. We'll see if he shows up. I love this Two of Pentacles. There's not a card I don't like in the deck. It really is an issue for me of, like, this beautiful Empress. Sometimes when I lay out the cards, I'm really drawn by the color palette, and sometimes there's the Devil. I just love this sort of, I don't know what the quality, there's like a subtle sort of openness to this card. It's sort of sexy and sort of smarmy at the same time, and yeah. So this is a deck that I actually get I rarely get requests for specific decks when I read, but this is a deck where people will say, "Oh, do you have this one?" Or when I'm teaching classes and doing a demo, folks will say, "Oh, can you pull this one off?" Now that I found it, I can actually do that. So I always thought this Emperor was sort of sexy too. I love this Judgment card, so beautiful. This Magician card is so beautiful. It's a gorgeous deck. Again, it's just one of those weird, I don't know if, like, I can even show you. Like, there are times where I'll do like 9 cards and sort of be like, oh, it's so yellow. Again, it's just sort of like one of my weird things as a reader. Like, let's actually just give it a quick shuff. Despite being glossy, this is an exceptionally beautiful deck to shuffle. Excuse me. Yeah, I think we're going to get very gray, which is appropriate for today. I love this Ten of Swords. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to sort of give you an example of what the hell I'm talking about, because the deck just wants to show you how great it is, and it should. It's a beautiful deck. I love the Star card. I mean, yeah, you know, it's like a deck where I'm like, why don't I pull this off the shelf more often? Because I'm a weirdo, and I have a lot of weird hang-ups. It's funny today, you know, I posted, one of the reasons I'm doing this, and this has been on my mind, was I was in the store the other day, and there was the Garbage Pail Kids Tarot, and I made a joke about it on Facebook today, and it ended up sparking a conversation I sort of wasn't anticipating or ready for, about sort of gatekeeping and stuff, and I really was just being a bitch about the sort of opportunism of mainstream publishers making everything into tarot regardless of whether it has anything to do with it. You know, and it's the interesting thing is that what prompted it is that I'm thinking about these modern decks and really trying to sort of challenge my own kind of entrenched love of colonial images, I guess. You know, so but I don't really think that Garbage Pail Kids belong in tarot, and if you don't agree with me, that's fine. This is the Outsider Tarot. It's another deck that I backed on Kickstarter. It's by Bobby Abadi. It's a really cool modern one. This one I don't resist much at all, but I forget that I have it. It's a bit spoopy in its way. It's a bit surreal. The suits are renamed. I love this card. Lights are fire, bottles are water, eyes are air, and roses are earth. And then the elementals, instead of the chords, are sparks, billows, fathoms, and roots, which I kind of like. Just, you know, again, it's like a thing I love in terms of just sort of like hand-drawn art, beautiful kind of, I don't know if it's gouache or watercolor, really interesting interpretations. The Nine of Lights here, this would be the Nine of Wands. You know, and there is a guidebook that I think is digital. I can't remember if you had to buy it separately, but the reason that I don't use this deck more is that it requires a little bit more of my active recognition and remembrance of the changes, of what the suits are and what the courts are. They're not as easy for me to remember as others tend to be. But it's a beautiful, beautiful deck. Just so well done. That's Britney Spears. There are real people in it, and Bobby in the guidebook does tell you who they are. And there's a queerness to this deck too, and I've shown this before. It's just so cool. So I don't know that this is one that I'll sort of work with in the coming months, although it certainly deserves to be. Again, it's just sort of, as a reader, because I've been reading for so long, when I read, usually I'm reading for someone else, and I just need to sort of know what I'm looking at immediately. And when I have to kind of work to make connections between suits and courts to the deck, I struggle a bit with it. So, and it's laziness on my part fully. This is the Next World Tarot, which I have liked a lot because it's really political. I don't use it that much because it's not neutral and it shouldn't be. It is the antithesis of neutral. It is making a point. It has something to say. Usually when I'm reading for others, I need neutral decks in order for the reading to sort of answer a question. But this is an incredibly important deck, I think, in a lot of ways, because it chooses to not be neutral. And I think that you know, I say a lot, and people hear me or not, people agree with me or not, but I think anyone today, particularly if we're white, practicing divination, have to recognize that divination is a political act in 2022, when for generations, people who are traditionally diviners, women of color in particular, queer people, outsiders, people on the fringes of society, on the fringe of what's acceptable in society, have both been demanded by the mainstream public and also tortured by and marginalized for doing what they do. In some cases tortured and killed for doing what they do because of religion. So this is the pocket edition, which just came in. This is a large deck, and so the pocket edition you can see is much smaller. It's much easier to shuffle. There are keywords on this deck, although they've never really bothered me because, again, this is a deck that isn't really interested in neutrality, is really not interested in not having something to say and in not letting its voice be heard. It is a deck that really does sort of span both age, body, gender, etc. You know, the Lover's card here, I think, is such a strong statement. You know, and it depicts kind of the world we're building right now, which is a world sort of decay and overabundance, of pollution, but at the same time manages to be kind of exceptionally beautiful and just a really amazing work of art. One of the reasons why I like the smaller edition is that the keywords are still there. They're a little easier for me to miss. Because the artwork is so strong, I don't necessarily need them, and I tend not to work with keywords anyway. But this is just an amazing work. This deck, though large, I have, even for someone with small hands, I have not really ever had a hard time shuffling because it side shuffles really well. But the fact that I do like 9-card spreads, for example, this one will probably get more use than this one did. But what's great about the large one is how easy it is to see what you're looking at. So, and it comes, you know, with a book that's pretty specific about this work of art. So, this is just, you know, one that, again, I feel like I don't avoid this deck. When I read for clients, usually what I'm reading for, you know, are things that are, I don't know. Like I said, as a reader, I need to sort of not be pulled in a certain direction in some cases, especially with relationship readings, where I tend to use like non-representational decks. See my last video. So this is the Fifth Spirit, which is another one that I got and looked at. I think I did a review or a walkthrough of it, and then it sort of went right on the shelf, and I never really used it again. For the same reason that I have ignored a lot of these decks. It's very modern. It is somewhat different and I really need to make sure I'm in frame. Obviously different. It's somewhat pippish in its minors, and you'd think that I would work with this and appreciate it more, and I do. you know, here's an example of sort of top surgery scars showing up in a card. And these just little sort of inclusivities, I think are really, really nice. Sort of like a whole cycle of life situation here. So the Fifth Spirit deck, you know, is one that I think I just kind of got distracted and put it up on the shelf, and as happens so many times. But this one is really neutral in a lot of ways, which is a thing that I actually really appreciate. And I'm looking at it now, and someone posted it the other day, which is one thing that prompted me to sort of look at all these decks again. The other thing that prompted me was the Tarot of Life, which I'll sort of re-show you in a second. So really just a great, great, great deck. This one is another one that is linen cardstock, and I don't love linen cardstock because it's so slippery and I'm so klutzy. But again, it's just a preference thing. So this is Charlie Claire Burgess, the Fifth Spirit Tarot. This is the first edition. I don't know if another one has come out. I think I'm sort of flashing back to my initial purchase of this deck and my review and some discussion of there being a second edition with some changes, but I can't now remember why or if that is just sort of a repressed false memory. This is one of my favorite modern decks, and I have used this one pretty extensively too. This is the This Might Hurt Tarot. It is the first edition. There have been several editions since. I don't know. I think that there may have been changes from edition to edition, but I don't know. This is a Waite Smith deck. This has a black sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Iridescent edging, which is the thing I don't love. It just looks a little too much for me, but this is one of my favorite hangmans. I mean, he's just really hot. This has a cartoony quality that I was surprised that I liked, but I really do like. This is very modern. Again, I don't use it more for that reason, but it's really good. You know, again, it's my buy, and that's one reason I'm doing this, is to sort of remind myself how good these are, and that it really is just a stupid little bias toward Eurocentrism, I guess. These sort of like fairy tale images that don't necessarily mean tarot. It's a beautiful Two of Cups. Again, there's something very queer about this. It is fairly young, I would say, but really good. I mean, and I love the cardstock on this one. This is matte cardstock that really works. This is a delight to shuffle. I have 2 copies of this, I think, because I liked it so much. So, the This Might Hurt Tarot by Isabella Rotman. That I like a lot. The Light Seers Tarot. What can we say about this? I have used this for a fair number of clients, and it reads really well. What can I say? This is the original Kickstarter edition. There is the Hay House edition, which I do have because I wanted to compare it. My feelings about Hay House are increasingly negative, and they were never particularly positive to begin with. This deck doesn't get used more in a way because I think it got skunked by the dialogue around it and the kind of, I don't know what word to use, the experience of the Eight of Cups. I'm sorry, is it the Nine of Swords? I can't remember. I have the original card, which I won't show, the Ten of Swords. I have, you know, this obviously had that card. A replacement was set to everyone, and I put that in this deck because it was sort of the wishes of the author. This is a completely modern deck. Again, like, it's not one, I'm going to be honest with you, like, artistically, it's not one I like. But it is one that reads really well for me for some reason. So it's an interesting thing about, like, despite my resistance to modern decks, it reads really well. Who knew? This has that cardstock that's a little... I love the green edging on this. I think I took the Hay House version and used a green marker that was about the same color. This has that kind of, like, resistant slip to the cardstock, but it does riffle fairly well. It doesn't overhand as well, but this is the new Ten of Swords. I don't want to get into, like, the whole conversation. I really don't want to reignite that conversation. I don't know that it was a particularly healthy one for anyone. But it also turned my willingness to sort of bring this deck out off. But it is one that has worked really well for me when I've used it. So what do you know? I do keep the original Ten of Swords. I don't know. This is the Gentle Tarot, and it's another one that I wouldn't say it's modern necessarily, but it's not modern. I backed this on Kickstarter and really liked it, and in many ways, the reason I don't use this deck is a cardstock issue. It is very hard to shuffle for me. In fact, I think it's still in order because it does sort of chunk together, so it's hard for me to shuffle. And it's also very animal-centric, which is the thing that I tend not to reach for, because I went through a whole phase where I was kind of only using animal decks, partly to sort of let myself off the hook regarding inclusivity and representation in decks, partly because I kind of liked them for a while. But this is a gorgeous work of art. This is the Kickstarter version. I think that there have been other versions since, maybe even a pocket one, although this isn't particularly large. I don't know that the new versions or recent editions have the same cardstock. I hope they don't, because I don't love this. But again, it's very animal-centric, and it's not... And I think all the Trumps are animals, are sort of... Oh no, because the lovers aren't. I don't know. It's like beautiful, but it doesn't call out to me in turn... This is the death card, but it's also the back. This is the back, as you can see, sort of. The minors I like a lot more than the majors. I do like this tower a lot. I like the star a lot. The moon is really beautiful. The sun is really beautiful. Judgment. The world is really beautiful. And then there's an extra card, the Unseen. So yeah, you can tell I've never used this because I find it difficult to shuffle. But you can see it's not sort of 2022 cell phones and, you know, hairdressers. It was created by an indigenous artist from Alaska, and it's really influenced by her environment, by their environment. I can't remember if I'm misgendering them. I don't think I am. But it's really beautiful. So it's cardstock and just all the animals, but it's gorgeous. It really is beautiful, and it's just like it's really stiff. I could shuffle it, if I wanted to. It is that kind of cardstock that sticks to itself. So I hope that modern editions or like more recent editions of this have like a less luxurious cardstock. This is the thing that kind of happened where we like started demanding great cardstock, and the cardstock got so good that it actually became difficult to shuffle. This was, if I remember correctly, printed with eco-friendly inks and decks, if I'm not mistaken. Did I make that up, or is that a thing that's real? I don't see it in here, but it's, again, beautiful work of art. And then the last one is the Tower of Life, which is the one that kind of kicked this whole sort of reckoning with my own sort of sense of like, why do modern decks look so modern? This is a deck that I had a lot of praise for, I really love. And there's some cards I really just feel turned off by, you know. Not a lot. I've read with this deck a fair amount. Every time I use it, people comment on how much they like it, and it's great. So, you know, it sort of made me sit down and go, okay, like, let me figure out why I resist these modern decks. I'm not going to flip through this whole thing because I really did a review of this like 2 weeks ago, or maybe slightly more. But I love it. I think it's fantastic. You know, and all of these decks, I think, you know, in their way are pretty fantastic. The only ones that I kind of love but sort of have a hard time connecting with as a reader are the Outsider for various reasons, the Gaian Tarot, and I don't really reach for the Trueheart when I'm not teaching. But these, you know, these are just a selection of what's out there. I'm curious, you know, if you have ones that you're really passionate about, that you think I should take a look at. You know, I clearly have enough, so I'm not really on the hunt for more, and I really sort of, in challenging myself to kind of deal with my own impressions of modern decks and my resistance to them, will, you know, pick a handful of these and sort of, you know, stick to working with them, to not overwhelm myself. I think, you know, my instinct is saying certainly the Fifth Spirit, the Cesar Ribito, the Tower of Life, and the Queer Tower are probably the ones that I'll focus on. I have worked with This Might Hurt a lot. I've worked with the Light Seers a lot. Like I said, it's weird. It's a weird experience because of what that deck went through. But these are just an array of modern decks that I think are really, really good and that I need to sort of get over myself with. So, long video. Hope it was interesting. Take care, be good, and we'll talk soon.